Hello again to Teach English Now. So glad you could join us. In this lesson, and throughout all the lessons, we will present guiding metaphors to help you think deeply about principles of teaching and language acquisition. Let's begin with the first. Language is cake. Well, what's this? Oh, you'll notice here that I have some cake. Is anyone willing to try it? Hungry? Like you need to be hungry for cake. You can have cake anytime you want. Cake is delicious. Well, I see someone in our virtual crowd has raised a hand. You want this cake? All right. Here you go. Does anyone else want cake? Are you sure? No takers? Well, I admit I'm slightly insulted on the first day of virtual class. Fine, let me try again. Just give me one more chance. Here we go. Here's some cake. I hope you enjoy it. All right, now why did I perform this tiny exercise? Besides the fact that you now know that I, as a teacher, am willing to look ridiculous. And what in the world is meant by the idea that language is cake? Now, we're going to give you a small opportunity to share some thoughts with others. This is optional, but I encourage you to think about this idea. Language is cake. And what you think I mean. Then, watch a few videos to see what others have said. Finally, if you want, take a minute to record yourself, telling us why you are taking the course and what you think the phrase, language is cake, really means. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to Teach English Now, and thanks for sharing your thoughts about our first metaphor, language is cake. There are a lot of ways language is like cake. It is motivating, it nourishes and strengthens you, and as my activity demonstrated, it can be presented in a lot of different ways. And yet, some learners hate learning languages. How can that be? I'm sure you will agree that learning a language is wonderful. Let me share an additional thought by discussing some fascinating research that will help us understand why some learners don't like learning languages. In a controversial but famous 1993 study by Harvard researchers Nalini Ambady and Robert Rosenthal, students observing teachers were able to accurately predict the teachers who were really bad and really good. What makes the study so controversial is the amount of time it took students to make those predictions. Want to take a guess? How long do you think students watched teachers in a classroom before they were able to predict if the teachers were good or bad? Well, believe it or not, it took students 6 seconds. And remember, they accurately, correctly predicted based on outside evidence, such as test scores and administrative evaluations of the teachers. Now, what is it that you think students could see in their teachers so quickly that could help them predict so well which teachers would help them learn? Personally, I have a hunch that the students weren't paying attention to the class content at all. So what were they paying attention to in those 6 seconds? Whether you like it or not, students are paying attention to you. Your presentation, your style, your way of standing up. In other words, while you may have the greatest tasting cake in your hands, how you present the cake is one of the most important factors for student success. Another way to say this is that learners often see technique before they see content. Teachers, on the other hand, seem to be divided into two groups, those that think about technique and those that think about content. Let me try to represent this visually. The relationship between technique and content is like points on a graph. On the x-axis, we have technique, represented by this blue line. And on the y-axis, we have content, represented by the red line. Now, let me ask you a question. University teachers, are they more interested in content or technique? Well, in my professional teacher training experience, I guess I would say that many university teachers care a lot about content. Perhaps this is because many perceive themselves as researchers, writers of books and articles. I remember hearing one educational expert remark that professors think of their bodies as nothing more than transportation for their brains. As a teacher trainer myself, as I do training, I am often surprised at how few university teachers have received any training about technique at all. Does that sound true to you? Isn't it weird that some of our brightest minds in the world have taken hundreds of courses, but never taken any courses, not one, on how to teach? They would fall into the high content, low technique area of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, let's talk about teachers in primary and middle schools. Do they use techniques? You better believe it. In fact, before primary teachers are ever given a chance to teach students, they are often given many courses on how to teach and make things both interesting and easily understood for students. They use colors, games, and stories. They use their hands and bodies. Bodies are not just transports for their brains. They are taught techniques that break down information and make it easy for a learner to understand. Techniques such as group work, flashcards, color-coded board work. I love it. However, the opposite problem can often happen here. While techniques are usually studied and utilized, sometimes primary and middle school teachers are not given the freedom to choose their own books and materials, and thus they spend most of their time thinking about technique and not about the content. Another problem in the balance of content and technique is the fun teacher. You know the one. His class is one game after another. You get to laugh a lot. He tells lots of funny stories about his 3 dogs, but how much have you learned? Do the games provide instruction as well as fun? Do the stories teach a key learning point? Or has much of the valuable class time been more social than educational? This is not meant as a criticism of teachers on either end of the spectrum. Certainly, there are university teachers that use fantastic technique, and primary teachers who create amazing content. And a fun teacher can also be an excellent educator. The point is, and what I want you to consider, is who you are and where you will find the happy balance between both content and technique. As you train yourself as a language teaching professional, keep in mind the tremendous difference that both content, the cake, and technique, your presentation of the cake, will make in having successful classroom experiences. While we discuss content in future lessons, the next few videos will be dedicated to the wonderful world of technique. Technique to help make your content, the cake, more delicious. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to Teach English Now. So far, we have discussed how learning a language can be a delicious experience, but that teachers can hurt that experience without proper technique. In the next few videos, we will consider several techniques to break down information and make meaning clear so that your students will ultimately progress. Please understand, if you can't make information simple and understood, there is no way that students will be able to learn. Now, let's talk about good teacher technique in general. I am sure that if we gave you a minute, you could think of great teachers you have had who used all kinds of techniques to communicate information clearly. Your great teachers probably used whiteboards, PowerPoint presentations, diagrams, hey, maybe even metaphors. All of these, when done well, can help foster communication and make meaning clear. In fact, whether your teachers knew this consciously or not, they were probably presenting information that was just right for your brain to process. They were teaching within a zone that was not too hard and not too easy. As Lev Vygotsky, a Russian psychologist, explains, teachers should be aware of 3 different learner zones. 1, what the learner can already do. 2, what the learner cannot do. And 3, what the learner can do with guidance from the teacher. This 3rd zone he calls the zone of proximal development. I call it the sweet spot, because cake is the most delicious when you are teaching within this zone. Stephen Krashen, an ESL theorist, has a similar theory called the input hypothesis. This hypothesis states that learners need to receive input that is just beyond their current understanding in order to grow. Just a little bit hard, a little bit new, so to speak. He calls it I plus 1, meaning input plus new information. Can you see how this resembles the zone of proximal development? Now, let's talk about what happens when you don't teach in the sweet spot. Here's a brief story. A few years ago, I taught in 2 places, at an English school and at a university. One of my students from the English school asked if she could visit a class I taught to university students. She was a very smart young woman, but had only been studying English for the past 3 months, and so she was a beginning English student. She was doing fantastic, and I loved to see her smile in class as she answered every question. When she asked to visit my upper-level university class, I said, of course. She came early and was smiling. However, as I began speaking, I remember how quickly her smiles turned into frowns. She told me afterwards, when you are teaching in my class, I understand everything you are saying, but in your university class, I felt like you were speaking a different language. For this visiting student, I was speaking too fast and using language too complex for her to understand. Krashen calls this I plus 10, indicating the input, at least for now, is out of the student's range of understanding. On the other hand, maybe you have encountered the opposite problem. Welcome to Animals 101. Please repeat after me. This is a dog. 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 This is a cat. 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 In this situation, you understand all the concepts the teacher is explaining, so it is, simply put, boring. Krashen calls this I plus 0, meaning the input is completely understood by the student and no learning is taking place. So, in summary, we don't want to share information that is too high, and we certainly don't want to share information that is too low. We want to provide information at the I+1 level, just new enough that it is challenging, but not so hard that it is overwhelming. You have to find that sweet spot and help students by breaking down information, going the correct speed, and using techniques to help students understand concepts that, without you, they would not understand. I will now present 3 different techniques to help you reach students better, starting with the first technique, body language. This technique could be what students in the Ambadi and Rosenthal study were noticing when they were observing teachers. There is so much a teacher can do to help learners understand through the use of hands, eyes, and movement in a classroom. In fact, some researchers put the level of nonverbal communication as high as 80% of all communication. Albert Morabian is noted for finding a 7, 38, 55% rule, supposedly denoting how much communication is conferred by words, tone, and body language. And did you know that in the language classroom, a teacher who turns his or her back from the students while talking is 3 times more likely to be misunderstood than a teacher who faces the students? This is because most nonverbal communication comes from the arms and the face. Body language and movements can also be used to help students make connections with specific vocabulary. I'll never forget when my Spanish teacher, who knew I was going to Venezuela, taught me a particularly Venezuelan Spanish word. It is a word that means to go forth or to move forward with strength and ambition. The word is pa'lante. To go forward. What a great visual to help me remember the meaning of the word. Pa'lante. While body language is a simple technique to understand, please take a minute to recognize that body language is an essential, integral, and necessary part of your teaching. Thanks for watching Teach English Now. And remember to never go back and always pa'lante. See you next time. Welcome back. A second vital skill you need to teach English well is to use teacher talk. Teacher talk refers to the need for a teacher to speak in a modified or simplified way to accommodate the current level of your students. Let's put this simply. Of course you talk differently to different people. Imagine, for example, that you have the same topic. Let's say what you did last weekend. But you share that topic to 3 very different people. A 4-year-old, your father, and your best friend. Does it change things? What would you share with the 4-year-old? How would you share it? What details would you change while sharing with your father? Better yet, what would you not share? And when talking with a best friend who you tell everything, would you find that you have a different rhythm, different vocabulary, and even different expressions? Absolutely. In fact, I'll bet you do this without even thinking. Good teacher talk is like this, but it involves a little more thinking and a lot of practice. Lots of new teachers, to be honest, are terrible at teacher talk. At the beginning, you might speak too fast or too complicated or too slow and simple. I have seen many teachers have well-leveled activities, but then when the teacher explains the activities to the students, the explanation is in an entirely different level than the activity. Whoops! But let's not just talk about mistakes we can make. Let's talk about what good teacher talk is. Teacher talk is made up of a lot of qualities that can include repetition, reduced grammatical forms, simplified vocabulary, signpost expressions, common cultural references, elaboration, clarification questions, and don't forget repetition. Let's look at each. First, let's talk about repetition. Repetition refers to the idea, of course, of restating an idea so it is clear to the learner. It is an essential language teaching strategy that many teachers over time learn intuitively. Maybe that is why my wife sometimes tells me to stop repeating things so often. Hey, I can't help it. I'm a language teacher. Also, when repeating something to help learners understand or emphasize its importance, teachers can use signal phrases such as, "Let me say that again," or "in other words," to help learners catch the repetition. Second is the use of reduced grammatical forms. This refers to the idea of making complex linguistic elements easy to understand. While many experienced teachers have intuitively learned how to reduce their language structures, many new teachers will have to learn how to simplify things into common tenses and to eliminate unnecessary or confusing phrases and clauses. Third is the use of simplified vocabulary. This is an easy concept to understand, but a difficult skill to learn, because it means you recognize, again, often intuitively, what students in an entire classroom are likely to know. Do they know the word justify? No. But perhaps they know the words give reasons. Another teacher talk method is the use of signpost expressions, which refer to transitional words or phrases that help guide a learner's attention to the form or structure of an utterance. A signpost is a signal word or phrase, such as first, or also, or for example, that screams to the learner, "You are here," or "Only one more idea to go." Next, let's talk about using cultural references in the classroom. Many teachers who are not used to dealing with second language learners use cultural references that are unfamiliar to their students. Like when your dad is talking to you about his favorite rock band from the 50s. You need to be aware of the common cultural knowledge of your learners and make sure that your examples and references match the student's understanding. Another skill that I love to use when I see students don't quite understand what I am saying is elaboration. In some sense, I stop, I slow down, and I begin again. It is more than just repetition. In elaboration, you expand the information by including definitions and examples. For example, if I gave you the word frond, you might not know what that means. To elaborate, I would give you a definition and show some examples. The last skill I want to talk about is asking questions and providing clarification. Ask questions to find out what learners have understood, and then correct or clarify information that is incorrect or misunderstood. And as a side note, when you do ask questions, please give students time to respond to those questions. Remember that silence can be a great technique in itself to create interest and elicit student participation. Not sure if your teacher talk is sufficient? Want to see some teacher talk in action? Please watch the example videos of teacher talk in the bonus videos at the end of this module. But here is a general tip. Language teachers are always paying attention to learners' eyes. If learners give you this look, chances are you need to revise and modify your teacher talk. Don't underestimate the skill of simply looking into students' eyes. In the next video, you'll learn one last useful skill to help you teach English now: scaffolding. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to Teach English Now. So far, you have been introduced to the concepts of body language and teacher talk, and their importance in helping you communicate with students, make meaning clear, and by so doing, help them to learn language. In this video, we are going to talk about scaffolding. The term scaffolding comes from the platforms workers use when constructing a building. Like those scaffolds, which provide a place for the workers to stand before the building is in place, teachers can provide guides and structures to help learners comprehend difficult concepts more quickly. The basic idea of scaffolding is to create opportunities for students to learn step by step, building upon tasks that will allow them to combine those basic concepts together to perform more difficult tasks. So, how do you scaffold? Well, one of the key scaffolding principles in language learning is the idea that for a student to understand new and particularly complex tasks, you first have to model behavior, guide students through different parts of a behavior by practice, and then have the students perform the complex behavior on their own. Let's show you an example of how this might work in language learning. First, model the behavior. Let's say that I have advanced students who are ready to learn how to use the passive voice. It is a pretty tricky advanced skill, so one of the best ways to teach this is to scaffold it. Generally, I will begin by showing examples of the passive voice, often in real context, and have learners get a sense of it. In order to better model the behavior, I would also break the process into steps and show those steps to my students. For example, I might show learners how you take an object from an active sentence and make it the subject, which is the first step. Then, for the second step, I might ask them to add the be verb. I would also probably only focus on present tense because using a lot of different tenses might confuse the students initially. And then finally, I might tell them to add the past participle after the main verb in the active sentence. I might also show them an optional fourth step, which is adding the subject of the active sentence using the by phrase. Now that I have modeled the behavior and shown the steps to the students, they are ready to move to the second part of scaffolding, which is practice in a guided or controlled fashion. I usually try to provide clear instructions and sample sentences to have students create passive voice, once again, performing each step within the process. First, I will have students find the object. Then, they will add the be verb, and finally, I'll instruct them to add a past participle. After having done a guided practice, you are finally ready to have students attempt an independent task. However, often this is an imperfect art. Sometimes if I see students struggling, I may start from the beginning yet again by looking at readings with passive voice, or maybe I will have them continue to do more advanced guided practices with me. Perhaps I will have students write sentences on their own and share those sentences with a partner. Scaffolding is not unidirectional. It is more recursive. A word that means I will go back and forth and do it again and again. Breaking it down for students and then giving them time to practice until they are comfortable with it independently. Model, guided practice, independent practice. Model, guided practice, independent practice, repeat. I think that you will agree that by putting all three techniques together, using body language, teacher talk, and scaffolding, that there is a performance aspect to teaching language, a way to reach a learner through a deliberate use of body, voice, and message. In this way, I think it is appropriate to say that for a message to be clear, understood, and enjoyable, for language to be cake, a teacher must be, at least in part, an actor. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining us here at Teach English Now and allowing us to take you on this journey towards deepening your understanding of the fundamental principles of teaching English. We have introduced you to the idea that some teachers tend to focus more on content, while others focus more on technique, and that you must strike a proper balance in order to be a good language teacher. The metaphor of language as cake emphasizes the need to take good content and make it presentable using proper technique. In general, techniques that help you make your meaning clear to students are essential. You learn the concept of the zone of proximal development, or what Shane called the sweet spot, which states that we must present information at the level students will understand. By presenting information at an I+1 level, we can ensure information will not be too low or too high for our learners. Techniques such as the use of body language can help make new or difficult concepts clear by giving learners visual cues to understand the message you are communicating. Teacher talk is a concept that also allows you to think of numerous ways that teachers communicate messages so that they are clearly understood, and also introduces the idea that a teacher must pay attention to the learner's current understanding. Don't forget to look into learners' eyes to see if they are with you. Finally, scaffolding is a teaching principle that refers to the idea of gradually introducing concepts from basic to complex, so that learners can move from modeled examples that they can watch to independent practices that they can perform. All in all, while you have been introduced to the concepts of teacher talk, scaffolding, and body language, please recognize that these are goals you will continue to develop throughout your career. I'm still improving my teacher talk and learning new techniques every day. And now we would like you to take a moment to reflect on what we are calling essential questions. At the end of each module, we will ask you to challenge a widely held assumption. We're asking you to do this in order to think critically about the information you have now and apply it to a commonly held belief. For this first module, we would like you to consider the widely held assumption: anyone who speaks the language can teach the language. What do you think? In light of our discussions, does that sound right to you? Thanks for visiting Teach English Now. In the next module, Shane will talk about how his 5 years of Spanish classes, from junior high to high school, never taught him to speak Spanish. Boy, can I relate to that.
Welcome everyone. I'm going to share a small story today about some of my students. I have amazing students. I have been teaching for about 20 years. Are you amazing students? Do you have amazing stories? I think so. You maybe don't think so. But my students have amazing stories. I want to share one of those stories with you today. And his name is Haru. And you will see it right here at the top. And the name of his story is The Lightning Bug. Okay? So let's go ahead and read this story. Now, before we begin, let me just ask you, does anyone know the names of these bugs? Do you know the names? Give me some English. Who has really good English? Anyone? What's the name of some of these bugs? I don't know. Guess. What do you think? Anyone? Yeah, what do you think?
Beetle.
Could be a beetle. Good. Anyone else? A potato beetle. What's the name of the story? Lightning bug. One of these is a lightning bug. Which one? We will talk. All right, let's read the story. Japan is homogeneous. Japan is homogeneous. This is a word I did not learn until many months after visiting the United States. But I felt the power of the word as soon as I moved here. Okay, what does this word mean? Japan is homogeneous. Did Haru understand the word? He doesn't understand the word. But he felt the power of the word. He didn't understand the word, but he felt the word. Let's go ahead and talk about homogeneous. Okay? All right. Everyone, please repeat after me. Homogeneous.
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 Oh, there's two pronunciations. Some people say homogeneous, and they will spell it with an extra E here. So you will see it spelled two different ways. I'm sorry, English is terrible. Is it very hard? English can be very hard, right? Homogeneous or homogeneous. Oh. Let's say homogeneous today, okay? So, Haru says that Japan is homogeneous. What does it mean? Of the same kind, alike, similar. Okay? Let's look at this. Homogeneous. What does it mean? Everybody's the same kind here? The same penguin. Right? The same penguin. Homogeneous. Right? The same what? The same tree. Okay. And here, of course, we're talking about people. And here you have homogeneous. Oh, here's another word. Please repeat after me. Heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous.
One more time. Heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous.
Good. Very good. What does heterogeneous mean? Okay, right. This is the same, and this is different. Now, of course, Japan is not homogeneous. There's many different kinds of people, many different kinds of food, many different kinds of... Have you been to Japan? How many people? Somebody from Japan? A wonderful place. Many different kinds of things. But Haru feels homogeneous. Let's find out why. Okay, let's keep reading. Homogeneous means being of the same type or group. It means fitting in. It means how I did not feel when I came here to the United States. I remember not even knowing how to order French fries, because the phrase we use in Japan is fried potatoes. Okay. I thought that it was what Americans would call them because I knew the phrase was in English. The phrase is in English, but what do Americans call fried potatoes?
French fries.
We call them French fries. Which one is better? Which one is better? Well, I like fried potatoes because it's fried and it's potatoes. It's very logical, very reasonable. French, why is it French? There's no French. It's American. But French is the style, the cut, very thin, is called French style. That's why Americans call them French fries. English. Okay. So, let's keep reading. I remember wondering why the cashier did not understand me. I saw fried potatoes everywhere. Yet when I told her what I wanted them, she just stared at me. Was it my accent? Was it my color? Right? So he goes up and he says, what does he say? Fried potatoes. What does the cashier do? What are you talking about? And he's like, fried potatoes! They're everywhere! Please, I want some fried potatoes. Oh, French fries. Okay? This is a big problem. So he feels different, right? We were talking about that in the other story. He feels different. In Japan, he feels what? What's the word? Homogeneous. Very good. He feels, it's the same culture, same people, same food. I am safe, I am happy. Now I'm in the United States. I cannot order food. That's sad, right? Have you ever felt this before?
Yes.
Yes? Yes, I want to go home. You feel different. Okay, let's keep talking. This is a strange feeling coming from Japan. In Japan, there are very few minorities. There I am the majority. People dress like me, they eat like me, People dress like me, they eat like me. What does he say? They are me. Right? They're like me. People dress like me, they eat like me, they are me. Right? In Japan, I feel safe. Okay, let's keep talking. White is exotic. Black is exotic. Only Japanese is normal. And now in the United States, I was exotic. So here's a picture of some French fries. Fried potatoes. All right. Exotic. Let's talk about the word exotic. What does it mean? What is exotic for Haru? What does exotic mean? Something from another country, from far away, right? And for Haru, exotic in Japan, what color is exotic? Black. White. That is exotic. In the United States, what is exotic? Haru. Right? Now, Haru feels exotic, and that's a weird feeling. Right? That's a weird feeling. I went to Venezuela, and in Venezuela, they thought, wow, he's American, he's different, he's exotic. And I thought, oh, I'm exotic. Thank you. Because in the United States, I am boring. Right? I am everyone. I am homogeneous. Okay, let's keep talking. Back in Japan, my older sister was at her desk. He's going to tell another story. Back in Japan, my older sister was at her desk studying for a college entrance examination, and something flew into her sight. At first, she didn't recognize what it was. It was a bug that was black, tiny, and moving slowly. She quickly learned that it was a lightning bug because the bugs behind lit up. She was so happy to see it that she kept it as a pet in a glass. The very day after, she was also studying at her desk when a black tiny bug flew into her sight. As she reached to grab it, she realized that the bug on her desk was a cockroach. What's a cockroach? You guys know what a cockroach is? So what did she do? What did she do? As she reached to grab it, she realized that the bug on her desk was a cockroach. Upon seeing that, she screamed very loudly and then, without mercy or a second thought, killed it. Quickly. What a difference a lightning bug and a cockroach were for her. Two bugs, different. Are they different? Let me show you one more time. By the way, exotic here, it depends where you are from. I am from California. Grapes are common, not exotic. But this fruit right here, very exotic. Kiwi, exotic. Pineapple, exotic. If you live in Hawaii, maybe grapes are exotic. It depends where you are from, right? It depends where you are from. Well, let's go ahead and look at this again. Which one is the cockroach? Which one is the lightning bug? How many people, please raise your hand, cockroach? How many people, raise your hand, cockroach? This is a lightning bug. This is a cockroach. Interesting, right? Are they different?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very different? Oh, I don't know. Let's keep reading. Let's finish this story, okay? All right. And so I learned that there are two kinds of ways to look at people also. So, two ways to look at people. Two ways to look at bugs. Ah, lightning bug, I love you. I put you in a jar. You are my pet. Ah. Right? I kill you, disgusting bug. Right? Two different ways. Now there are two ways to look at people also. Let's read it. I will call it good exotic and bad exotic. For example, when I walk into a math class, immediately students wanted to sit next to me. And at least two people asked for my number on the first day. It did not take long to realize that Americans had a positive stereotype about Asians in science and math classes. Do you guys know what a stereotype is? A positive belief, a positive understanding, a superficial understanding about a group or a people. So, what's the stereotype for Asian? It's positive. What does he say? Asians are good at what? Asians are always good at science and math. True? You are Asian, you are good at math. True? Always? No?
To some extent.
To some extent, maybe yes. Right? It's a stereotype. It can be generally true. Right? Japan scores against American scores for math are very different. But some Americans are good at math. And some Japanese are bad at math. Is there somebody here Japanese who's bad at math? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Everyone here is good at math, right? Okay, let's keep talking.
On the other hand, when I went to a dance club, it was almost impossible for me to get the courage to ask an American girl to dance. Although I had my American roommate there to encourage me, I felt like I was foreign, even ugly. This is a big problem. How does Hadu feel? Yeah, that's really interesting. He goes to a math class. Everyone's like, oh, Hadu, can I have your phone number? You are my friend. Now he goes to a dance. How does he feel? Imperfect, strange, maybe even ugly. That's so sad. That's so sad. Let's keep reading. Perhaps this is not true. I do not mean to offend, and perhaps it is my own fear of feeling different. I simply don't look like that so blue-eyes boy as he glides across the floor. I look like me. Oh, this is a very sad sentence for me. He looks at the boy with blue eyes, maybe blonde hair. He's smiling. And what does Hadu feel? I don't look like Tom Cruise. I don't look like Brad Pitt. I look like Hadu, right? And this makes him uncomfortable and maybe afraid. Have you guys ever been afraid coming to the United States? Has there been some times when you feel afraid and you feel different? And maybe different can be good, and sometimes different feels very bad, right? And that is what he is feeling right now. Let's finish the story. I have to decide if, even though I do not look like him, that I am also something and someone who these girls will dance with. There are many Japanese stories that reminded me to be brave. And I decided to be brave. I walked to a group of girls and said, in my broken English, perfect English? No, it's broken. It's not perfect English. I go to the girls. Hi, girls. What does he want to say? Will you dance with me, right? And he asks in his broken English if anyone would like to dance. One girl turned away, not just with her eyes, but with her body. Another looked at her friend, and both began speaking as if I were not there. But the fourth girl said yes. I could not help smiling. Four girls. So he talks to the first girl. What does she do? Oh, that's good. Perfect. Thank you. Whoa. What does the second and third girl do? What do? Talk to each other. They ignore him. And what does the fourth girl do? She says yes. Right? And Hadu could not help smiling. Here is the end of his story, which I love. I love the end of his story. This is what it says. So I think that on days that we are not homogeneous, that's our key word, we must make a decision. When we meet those who are different from us, are we cockroaches or lightning bugs? And I think it is our own choice. It is something we must believe about ourselves. What do you think? Do you agree with Hadu? It's something I need to believe. Oh, I feel ugly. I feel brave. People will like me. I am different. It's good. Good exotic, not bad exotic. Here's my favorite line. It's the last sentence. As for me, I choose to go. What does he mean? Hadu says, as for me, I choose to go up. What does that mean? He wants to shine. Very good. He wants to show the world he's not afraid. Maybe you are a little bit afraid sometimes, right? Maybe you are a little afraid sometimes. I want to give you just a couple minutes, okay? And my question is, how do you glow? What do you need to do for you to glow? Okay? So I'll go ahead and let you think about that, and we'll talk about that, and our reading for today is over. Thank you.